time for the Property Podcast, where every week tens of thousands of property investors, new and experienced, join together to get news, knowledge and laughs at our expense. With me, Rob Bence.
And me, Rob Dix. Join us every Thursday morning for your weekly dose of property ideas and motivation. Then head over to our website at thepropertypodcast.com to keep the conversation going. Now though, let's get started.
Welcome to the Property Podcast. It's episode 26. We're back again. I'm Rob Bence, and with me every week is the fine, upstanding gentleman that is Rob Dix.
Hello, Rob. These intros are getting better. I like it. Yeah, so the rationale for this week's episode is we had our meetup a couple of weeks ago, as we are going to talk about No Doubt very soon. And one of the things that kept coming up in that for me when I was talking to people was analysis paralysis, people kind of not knowing what kind of investment they should go for. So we're going to attack this in this episode by giving you 20 property investments that you can most certainly avoid. We gave you 5 things to avoid a few weeks back, and we've got 20 more for you to narrow the field a little bit more. We're also going to be looking at London's cheapest property with our news story and keeping you fit with the resource of the week.
But before we get going, we always like to say thank you for our reviews. And again, this week is no different, but when you hear them, you'll know why. The first review says, why I look forward to Thursdays. Calvin says, not only is this the best property podcast, but the best podcast on iTunes. Best presenting style out of all the podcasts I've listened to, making learning about property very easy and enjoyable. As a beginner to property, I'm learning a lot from the podcast, and I'm looking forward to my first property investment. And now, thanks to the Property Podcast, and that's from Calvin. And he was at the meetup, so thank you, Calvin. That's a great review. It's good to see you on Thursday. This one is from Gregory Miller, and he is in the United States, and it says, the best podcast on iTunes. Hi, Rob and Rob. I'm 28 years old, and I'm aspiring to be a property investor in the US. I'm getting married this month. Congratulations. But as soon as my wife and I buy our primary residence, we're buying our first buy-to-let, or buy-to-rent, as we call it in the US. The content is exceptional every week. Each and every week, the topic is genius. This is my favourite podcast on iTunes. It's been immensely helpful in providing the information and great resources for newbie investors. Keep up the terrific work. Well, that's another fantastic review. Thank you.
Not bad, is it?
Yeah, thank you, Gregory. And finally, Kane says, excellent content, likeable guys, great show. I've listened to hundreds of podcasts and never felt the need to review any of them, but these guys are superb, informative and fair. Great subject matter. I love the show. Well done, guys. Well, thank you so much to all three of you for taking the time to leave us reviews. They are very, very nice.
They really are. And as we said last week, we've crossed the 100 review barrier now, which is just amazing. And let's keep pushing on for 200. We're so grateful for all the feedback we get. But talking about listener interaction, I know that we've both had really, really busy weeks, but the biggest thing in both of our weeks was our meetup, of course.
Oh, it was. That was absolutely fantastic. The thing about the meetup is, yes, we can see the listener downloads numbers, and yes, we can see the reviews coming in and the emails and the conversations that we're having on the phone. But for people to, come out their way and come and meet us personally and, to talk property, you never know what to expect. And it was quite a humbling experience, actually, Rob, wasn't it?
We've got really, really great listeners. They're just all really lovely people, really smart, and just really excited about learning stuff and getting on and using property to improve their lives. And just the positivity was what really struck me. And we must have had, 40-odd people there?
Yeah, easy. The thing is, we did it over 3 hours, so people arrived, and then some went, and then some came later on, so it was nice. I mean, we didn't actually get to speak until the very, very end, so apologies, Rob. People probably think we don't like each other.
Yeah. But it was pretty full on. I certainly didn't get to talk to everyone, although I tried, but I'd just like to say a huge thank you to everyone who came down and to everyone who's emailed since. I've had lots of lovely emails since then as well. So thank you to everyone for coming down. And a couple of people suggested to me that we should do, for a start, they said, when's the next one? I was like, we might have to do another one. And then a couple of people said, are you going to do a northern one for all your northern listeners? So, I suppose this might have to become a bit more of a regular thing now.
Absolutely. Of course we're going north. I can't let my heritage and my roots down. So we'll definitely go and do one up north, but we just have to make sure when we're both there and tie things in. But we will definitely plan to do that, and we will let you know when it's going to happen.
And Rob, I know that you've been getting some responses to our secret episode as well.
Incredible amount of sign-ups to the mailing list since we've announced that, and lots of people have emailed in saying they've enjoyed it. So If you've not joined the mailing list, not only will you get the episodes sent to you every week and absolutely no selling, but you'll also get a secret episode. So get yourself signed up to that because it seems to have got really good feedback. So I'm glad that everyone who's got in touch has enjoyed it.
We should move on. I'd love to talk more about the meetup because it was just such an absolutely fantastic evening. But for now, let's move on and tell us which news story you've picked out.
Yeah, I like this one. The last property in London for 100k. Okay, so it's the last property in London for 100k. And it's in Brixton. It's not a beauty. It might have a lot of personality, but it's certainly not a looker. Even the estate agent describes it as horrendous.
You know you got problems.
Yeah,
when that happens.
When that's the pinnacle of their marketing, is describing it as horrendous. So actually, it could be a clever tactic because we're talking about it.
It's true. Tell you what though, my favourite bit of spin from the article, the selling point they came up with, is they said it's only 5 minutes from the tube station, and because it's at the end of the Victoria line, you're guaranteed to get a seat in the morning. Although that was an ingenious bit of marketing spin.
I like the way they compared it, though. Recently, a parking space elsewhere in London went for 300,000. You can get a sleeping bag, or even sleep in your car, I suppose, in your parking space, or you can get this flat in Brixton. All three of them if the two more turn up on the market. So have a look at the show notes on the website. It's, as I say, it's not one to miss. It's definitely a looker.
The serious side of it, the reason it's so cheap, as well as the fact that it looks pretty ropey, is that it's only got a 56-year lease remaining. And I suppose that's something to always think about when you're buying flats, and possibly there are going to be costs on top of the 100,000 to get that lease extended. But yeah, it is also spectacularly rubbish. So go and have a look at the photos, which are linked to from the show notes. So quickly moving on then, because we've got a heck of a lot to get through with this topic of the week, because we've committed ourselves to coming up with 20 more property investments to avoid. And this all comes from a thread on Property Tribes. Other property forums are available, but it is our favourite. And it was started by a listener, Graham Clark, who linked to the episode that we did on 5 property investments to avoid. And that started a whole discussion where people chipped in with a load more. I think they got up to over 30 in the end. Some of them are brilliant, some of them we didn't agree with, but we've kind of picked out 20 of those to talk about in a little bit more detail. So we're going to link to the thread in the show notes, thepropertypodcast.com/26, so you can go and look at all the discussion around this. But for now, we're just going to whip through 20 of them. So we're going to have to really do this quickly, aren't we?
Yeah, and before we start, we should also say thank you to Vanessa Warwick, who actually contributed quite a lot of these.
Yeah, some of hers are great.
Yeah, her and Nick run the website, and it's a fantastic website. It was one we mentioned before that you should go check out. And Vanessa's actually kindly said that she'll do a show for us as well in the future, similar to like some of the people have in the past as well. So listen out for that one coming up. But let's get going because we've got plenty to go through.
Okay, so kicking us off with number 1, property in an area that's oversaturated with investors. You see this a lot in student areas, but you see it in other places as well. That means an exit can be difficult, and it means there's a lot of competition for tenants. So you ideally want a good mix, not be buying where everyone's an investor. Yeah,
and the one you can link to that as well is a block of flats where, huge block and everyone's an investor. It's not just areas, it could be a single block of flats as well where the majority are investors. It's one of the things that we look at in the Big 50 report, which is the due diligence document we use at RMP Property. It's one of the things that we look out for as well. So it's a really good one to kick us off. The next one, the best house in the worst street, a classic, okay? So the theory goes that you should not target the best house in the worst street. What they say is you should go for the worst house in the best area. So that's what they say you should do. There are exceptions to every rule, but generally I think this one sticks true for me, and I think it's a good one to have on the list.
Yep, and you can improve the house, but you can't improve the area all in your own. That's the logic, at least. Okay, number 3, a property you have never viewed. That should be self-explanatory, but you do get people who buy blind. Not something I'd want to do. You want to have a look at it for yourself and see what secrets it might be hiding that whoever's trying to flog it to you hasn't told you about. So definitely worth going and actually laying eyes on the thing before you splash out a load of money on it.
Now, I have to say, I actually have bought a property I've never seen, and I've still never seen it, so I hope it's there.
Are you getting rent from it? That's the main thing.
I am getting rent from it. I think generally, for most investors, this rule holds true. But if you have someone, and I had someone working for me, to go and look at this investment for me, so someone I trusted implicitly, then that's fine. That doesn't mean that you should trust anybody who says, yes, I'll look at it for you, because their expectations of a development or a house or an apartment, wherever, might not meet yours. But in this case, the property I went for was a new build. I knew who the developer was. I'd researched that. I'd spoken to a number of people on the ground. I knew the area as well, and I had somebody who went to look at the deal and put the deal together. So not for everyone, for the vast majority of people it isn't, but I was comfortable. So it just depends on you as an investor.
And that leads on nicely to the next one,
Which is off-plan property from a developer with no track record of completions. Generally, again, a rule that should be listened to. Don't buy a development off-plan from a developer who's never completed one before. So there are a couple of things you can do to protect yourselves. One of the things is look out for the NHBC flags outside of development. The NHBC is like a guarantee. Now, most people know it for that it protects the development and the build up to 10 years afterwards, after it's complete. Okay, and that's what most people know it for. But it actually protects your deposit up to 10% as well. So if you buy an investment, you put a 10% deposit down of the purchase price. So say it's 100,000, you put 10% down on exchange and nothing to completion, then your money is protected by the NHBC if they're signed off by them. The second way is the money can be held in escrow. So you might have an agreement with the developer that the money's to be held in escrow. They can't go and touch your money and take it and then say, oh, we're not going to build. Generally a great rule, but there are things you can do to protect yourselves.
I think you might need to do a whole episode about that. That sounds really interesting. I didn't know all of that. Okay, number 5 is flats with very high service charges. Service charges, you as the investor are always going to be paying those, even if you've got a tenant. And so a high service charge can really kill your profit. And that's one of the reasons why we say that gross yield is pretty useless as a metric, because it doesn't take account for things like that, where you might have one flat with a very high service charge, one with a low one, but they've got the same gross yield, or even a house where there's no service charge at all. Things to look out for are obviously concierge or large area of communal garden or something like that tends to rack up the service charge, as do lifts. If you've got lots of lifts, they can make for high service charges as well as just incompetent management companies or management companies who are trying their luck. But you'll want to, as part of your due diligence, look at the service charge statements from previous years so you know what you're likely to be getting yourself into.
I agree, Rob, and what you've said is exactly what we say in the Big 50 report. But just to play devil's advocate, one of the things I say, there's always exceptions to every rule. So the exception could be, it'd be rare for this to happen, but I also say, look at the ROI at the end. So we've mentioned gross yields, but however, if you've got a really good deal and the service charges are really high, but the rents are still high and the rents absorb the service charges and the ROI is very strong, then actually the numbers in the middle don't matter as much as the number at the bottom, your ROI, what you're getting back at the end of every month. Generally, the rule, absolutely correct, and one I completely agree with, but it's interesting that whenever you think about any of these rules we're running for, that there are always exceptions.
Okay, so what number are we up to now? Number 6.
Okay, so property downwind of a sewage farm. Go figure, Rob. Well, unless you've got no sense of smell, and then you'll be fine.
Yeah, if you've got no sense of smell, then buy it to live in. I mean, no one else will live here. You'll get a bargain. That's everything we have to say about that one.
Yeah.
Number 7, kind of similar, is a property close to a noisy depot or factory. And yeah, I used to live opposite a pub where about 5:30 every morning they would empty all the glass bottles out of the bottle bank and into a lorry. And that was no fun at all. And I'm sure like a noisy depot or factory with vans coming and going at all hours would be even worse. And so it's one of those things that you might kind of get caught up in the excitement of your numbers and not think about, then find that it's a bit of a pain to rent when your tenants notice. So that's what I'd probably agree with.
Okay, so number 8 is property with subsidence. So subsidence is when the property is falling apart, basically. So, I mean, that's the technical term. It's something your surveyor will pick up, not should, will pick up. If it has it, it's going to cause a lot of issues further down the line. Should you never buy it? Well, it depends. If you think you can renovate the project and there's value in it, then, there may be an exception. But as a general rule, for most investors, it's probably a no-go.
Number 9, property in a flood area. Another straightforward one. Not something I know a lot about, but I'd imagine that the main challenge here is going to be insurance. Either you won't be able to get it insured or it's going to cost you an absolute fortune. Possibly best avoided.
Absolutely agree. One of the things we do is we look the environmental agency's website. You can type in the postcode and it tells you if it's in a flood area or not. So really easy one to research. So we'll link to that in the show notes.
Okay, number 10.
Is a property deal where the gross price is put on the mortgage application, but you're paying the net price, which equals mortgage fraud. Okay, we'll try and be as concise as possible here. But there was a time when you could buy a property, put a higher price than you're actually buying it for. So let's say 100,000, and then you were actually really only paying 75,000, but you would get a mortgage on the 100,000, say a 75% mortgage, so you put no money down. So I know I've said that quickly, so I hope it makes sense. But £100,000 purchase price, you're actually paying 75,000, so you get a 75% mortgage. So in theory, you put no money down. Sounds fantastic. It's mortgage fraud.
It is. Don't do it. Okay, so we are at the halfway point. Breathe deep. We're going to get there.
Let's get the oranges out, Rob.
Okay, so number 11 is a property deal where you have to use deal sources, broker, and solicitor. This is another one that I don't know much about. I'm guessing this might be more your world, but it seems like if you have to use certain professionals and you're not free to choose your own, that implies that there's something dodgy going on that they're going to be prepared to rubber stamp that others might not be willing to. I think that's what this is getting at.
Absolutely. I think the key word, and it was highlighted on the post, is have. You have to use them. At RMP, we recommend, and we can say, here's who we think will be best for this role if you don't have anyone, but we don't force you. You've got the choice. That's what's important, the choice. Now, if you're told you can't go ahead with this deal unless you use our broker and our solicitor, alarm bells. Just one to be wary of.
All right, number 12. A property deal that promises unrealistic returns. And I think all I have to say about this one is that the whole thing about if it looks too good to be true, then it probably is. That holds true for property as it does for pretty much everything else in life.
Absolutely. Don't kid yourself. Try and trick yourself into thinking, well, it could be real. It almost certainly isn't. Okay, a property deal where someone's getting a huge commission. We've covered this one before. I've bashed student pods probably more than anyone else. It's just, if there's a huge commission payment being paid... Well, let me first of all say, there's nothing wrong with people earning money. If they're providing a service, then, they should be paid for it. However, if they're paid an extortionate amount and it doesn't, the percentage amount of what they're being paid against the property or the investment you're getting is really high, then I would have alarm bells. How can they price in 20% commissions? It doesn't sit well with me. There's something clearly not right in the deal. It certainly calls alarm bells, but would probably, get me to walk away from the deal.
Okay, and number 14 is a property deal with no clear exit strategy. And I think student pods are probably quite a good example of this one as well, because you can't sell it to just anyone. You've basically got to sell it to another investor. And who's to say that by that time, whatever guarantee you've offered has been run out, and who's to say whether it's going to look attractive or not? I think it's generally a good idea to have multiple exit strategies. We've talked before about how you'd never want to be in a position where you're forced to sell. That's where, if you're at the wrong point in the property cycle, you might be forced to convert a paper loss into a real loss. So really, you want to have multiple exit strategies, and if you can't go into it saying, right, here are the ways that I'm going to get out of this and the circumstances under which I'm going to do it, probably best avoided.
So the next one is number 15. Any property deal where you're put under excessive pressure by a third party to go ahead. This, I think, was related to the property industry in general, where unfortunately there are a few bad apples. They will get your details, whether you've given them voluntary or they have been found by buying your data. They call you up and straight away they're down your throat with, we've got the deal of a century, you need to buy now, you're going to miss out. I know it sounds like really common sense principles, but people do cave under the pressure. That's why these companies exist. So one to be very, very wary of. Don't go near any company that feels the only way to make their deal good look is through hard selling.
Right, number 16. I like this one. Any property deal where your gut instinct tells you it's wrong. I'm a pretty rational kind of person. I don't believe in asking the universe for things and all the rest of it, but I do believe in gut instinct. And rather than being kind of gut instinct, I think it's like the fact that your brain is taking in all these inputs and all these things that you don't necessarily have any awareness of and you couldn't verbalize, but you are getting this information in, and that often means that you can get a funny feeling about things and you don't know why, but something is telling you that it's wrong. And if you listen to that, then you don't necessarily have to have a reason, because you never have to buy a particular property. So if it looks great and you've done all the numbers and everything makes sense, but there's something's nagging at you, then it might be one to avoid. You might never find out why, but you might have done yourself a favour, and whether you know about it or not. So I definitely recommend listening to your gut instinct.
Completely agree. Okay, 17. Properties that are close to fracking sites. Okay, that was fracking. It's pretty topical at the moment. I can't claim to know a lot about this, Rob. I understand what fracking is, but really the impact of it on properties, on the areas, it's still up for debate. Some people says there's clearly issues there. Some people say there isn't. It's not really for us to say, but I would say that it's something to take into consideration. You might be comfortable with it, but clearly other people might not be. At very least, take that into consideration because, if some of the things are true that they're saying is true, then there could be serious problems down the line.
And I think there's some more discussion about that on the thread itself where people who know more than we do are going into some more detail about that. Okay, we are on the home straight. Number 18 is a leasehold property where the unexpired term of the lease is less than 75 years. This was something I mentioned earlier with a news story where we were talking about that flat that only had 56 years left. That means you're not going to be able to sell it on without doing something to extend the lease because no one's going to buy it off you with a lease that short. So you're going to have to take some kind of action. It's going to cost you money to get that lease extended, or there might even be other complications and you can't do it at all. So again, tying into the exit strategy we talked about earlier, unless you actually know about these things, and there are people who specialize in buying things with short leases and getting the lease renewed, unless that is your strategy, probably easiest stayed away from.
Yeah, I completely agree, Rob. For the vast majority of investors, not for you. It is a very niche investment strategy. If you fall into it or know somebody who can really teach you the ins and outs of it, then great. It's not one that either of us touch, but there are people out there who do it. Okay, 19, any property that's purchased for less than 25% loan to value. So that's basically saying that you should only buy property with 75% mortgages, loan to value mortgages or more. Now, this is a big topic, leverage. One we've covered in a previous episode. So you can go back and listen to it. We'll link to it in the show notes so you can directly find it. But that was a good episode. One that Jonathan Clark on Property Tribes talks about a lot, Rob. He's covered leverage extensively before.
He's a big fan of leverage. I can't remember offhand what kind of level of leverage he advocates, but he's kind of the more the merrier kind of, you're getting this free money to boost your returns, so great. There are other people who are more cautious. For example, Mark Alexander, who did an episode for us before, he's far more cautious about the level of leverage he takes on, and he also wants to have a certain proportion of cash in the bank versus the amount of borrowing he's got. It's a debate that there is no right answer to. It's all about what you're comfortable with. But as a general rule, having a loan to value of 75% or lower seems pretty safe to me. Okay, so finally, number 20 is properties that are bought in areas where DSS tenants make up the majority of lets. And this is a bit of a controversial one. I can't remember who proposed it on the thread, but some people would say, yep, absolutely, but others would absolutely disagree with this. For example, on my podcast before, I've interviewed Aki Elahi, who's got a whole portal called DSS Move, which is about finding properties where the landlords accept DSS tenants, and his entire portfolio and all the properties he manages for others are made up of DSS tenants. And he sees it as an opportunity because if you buy in areas where DSS tenants make up the majority, it's going to be hard perhaps to attract professional tenants and you might have difficulty with your exit, again, selling it on. But if you know what you're getting into, you can make pretty good money. There's also the problem, of course, that you never know what's going to happen with benefits rules in the future and you're kind of at the mercy of the government. That's perhaps something you might not be comfortable with. But there are people who are doing very well. So again, depending on your goals and what you're trying to achieve, what you're comfortable with, you might totally agree with that. You might go, no, I want to buy in an area where the fundamentals are good, where there's lots of professional demand, so you've got more options. But then again, as a niche strategy, which we've talked about before, you might find that works really well. So that's probably one of the more controversial ones on the list to end with.
Yeah, but I think you've nailed it, Rob. I've got nothing to add. So that's our 20. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you to Graham Clark for starting the thread in the first place and obviously mentioning the episode, which was 5 property investments to avoid. So go back and listen to that one if you haven't. But there was a good conclusion as well from Cormac Henderson.
He replied on the thread and he thought that maybe the statement would be better stated as rather than investments to avoid, but as investments where you should reduce your offer by 20%. And I thought that was a really interesting point. It's like, yeah, you're not necessarily going to totally kill a deal because it's opposite a a truck depot or something like that. But it does give you the kind of leverage to go in there and use that as a reason to reduce your offer. Or again, it could be that you know that some work needs to be done. So in the case of subsidence, if you know what you're doing, you might know that you can remedy that for a certain amount of money. So if you reduce your offer far enough, then you can get that work done and still make a good profit. These aren't necessarily things to avoid, but the key things is you'll only want to be getting into them if you know what you're doing. Because investors who know what they're doing can thrive in unusual situations. You get investors who will only buy properties that have subsidence or have short leases or something like that because they know inside out what needs to be done. Because not many people are willing to go there. They can buy at a good price, they know what they're doing, they can remedy the problem, and they can make a lot of money. But that's only if you know what you're doing. If you just are buying one of your first properties, you want an easy ride, you want money in the bank and not have to think about it too much, these are definitely not places that you should be going.
So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you got a lot from it. We now move on to our resource of the week. And before we give you a new resource, we wanted to give you a bit of an update. Because we mentioned a app called Focus at Will a few weeks back. And I said I just discovered it, so I'd let you know how I've been getting on with it. And Rob's since been using it as well. So the feedback is, we both really like it.
We do. Which channel have you been using? Because you can get classical music or more upbeat dancey stuff. What's working for you?
I'm quite specific, actually. I go upbeat tempo, but low intensity in the morning and medium intensity in the afternoons. So if you've not looked at the app, that probably means nothing to you. But if you go and have a look, it'll all become clear.
The idea is that it just plays you kind of boring music or music that's easy to ignore. So it doesn't have any vocals in or anything like that. And it's meant to kind of get you into the zone to concentrate. And maybe it's a placebo, but I do feel like it's working.
Yeah, I think so. What's your choice? What do you listen to?
I tend to do classical low intensity earlier in the day, and then I'll do upbeat high intensity when I really need to get something done. That's normally but when something's been on my Trello for 3 days and it still hasn't been done. It's like, right, let's knuckle down and do this.
Wow, you're hardcore.
You've got to work up to it. That is our update and Focus at Will. But our actual resource of the week is something called Fitocracy, which is at fitocracy.com on the web, and you can get it for Android and iPhone as well. This is another resource. It's a bit like, Rob, I remember a while back you had an app where you got chased by zombies or something like that.
Zombie Run.
That's it. And I never did get quite into that. But another way of being motivated, if you don't want to be chased by zombies, is to use Fitocracy. And what this basically is an app where it kind of gamifies the exercise process. And so you can track your workout every day, put in what you've done, and it awards you points. And there are different levels and badges and all that kind of thing. And there's a really great community on there as well. So you can join groups of, like, for example, there's a group of people who want to run a 10K. And so you can join that and interact with people and share training tips and stuff like that. The thing that I really like about it is it's got something called quests, which is where there are lots of different things to choose from, where it sort of sets you little challenges. And so it will say, okay, so today to win this quest, go and do a 2-mile run and 40 push-ups and 30 squats or something like that. And you just go and do it. And what I like about that is often I find that I just get really bored if I do the same workout every day. And I'll find that I'm not pushing myself that hard. So it's quite nice to shake things up and let the internet decide for me what I'm going to do. It just kind of keeps things a bit more fun. And then you get the satisfaction of seeing points at the end of it as well. So Fitocracy is my resource of the week. It's, again, nothing to do with property, but if people are into exercise or maybe want to, but have always found it a bit boring, it might be a good thing to try out.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, people always give us lots of feedback about the resources of the week, and they say that it's varied, so we'll continue to do that as long as you want us to. So that's us for another week. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Next week, though, we've got another episode, of course, we're not leaving you, and it's called What Rich Dad Poor Dad Can Teach Us About Property Investment.
Yep, so this is a former resource of the week as well, Rich Dad Poor Dad, and a few people at the meetup mentioned this book to me as well. It seems like it's an important book for so many people, but not actually a lot about property in there. So we're going to cover off what is in the book about property and kind of add our own conclusions about what we think you can learn about property investment by using the principles from the book.
Absolutely. Rich Dad Poor Dad is probably one of the most influential, if not the influential book about property investment. But it hardly talks about property investment specifically, so we're going to relate it to property investment, so it'll be a lot easier for you. So I'm really looking forward to that one. And we've also got a final request for a listeners episode we're doing in a few weeks' time. We need your help, everyone.
We do. So Episode number 30, we want to dedicate it entirely to listener questions. We've got quite a lot of questions in already that we've been asked. We've also got a few audio questions where people have left us a voicemail. So this is a really great opportunity. If you haven't sent us a question yet, send it over and we'll try and answer that as part of episode 30. All we're going to do is bash through as many listener questions as we can. We would absolutely love it if you could leave us a voice message with your question, because that'll make the show so much more fun. It'll make it easier for listeners to relate to it, and it'll just mean that we get some voices other than ours to break it up a little bit. All you have to do, if you want to submit a question, is go to the website at thepropertypodcast.com. You'll see a little thing popping up inviting you to leave a voicemail. All you have to do is click the button, talk into your computer, and that will record a voicemail that will be sent straight over to us. You can re-record it if you screw it up, and we would absolutely love it if you could do that. If you're not feeling that brave and you don't like speaking on the phone, that's fine too, and you can just use our contact form to submit your question instead. So that's going to be in a couple of weeks' time, but do get your questions in now.
Lovely. Okay, well, that's us for another week. Thank you for joining us. Thank you once again to everyone who turned up for the meetup. We really appreciated it. You didn't leave us on our own. And we'll join you next Thursday morning.
Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to The Property Podcast. Make sure you join our mailing list at thepropertypodcast.com.
And remember, we love 5-star reviews. Rob even loves them more than air miles.